Hashtag scholarly army. Excellent. Love to see that. We'll get started soon. We'll just wait around 5 more minutes before everyone joins in. Getting some scholarly armies. What year's everyone in for the kids here? Or if the parents are listening in, what year is your child in so I can get a general idea what the audience is like. Year 5, year 6. Oh, a lot of the year 6s. How are the year 6s feeling about the selective coming up? Bit nervous, prepared, scared? How are we feeling for that? Nervous and excited. Yeah, it's definitely a nerve-wracking experience. Terrified. It's all right. I definitely can relate to a lot more of the kids here since I'm a bit younger. So same with all the other tutors we have. I know how it feels. I know how exciting it is as well as nerve-wracking. Um, but it definitely gets better. It's not all of that. Once you've done it, you've done it. Let's get that hashtag scholarly army going in the chat for the scholarly kids that we have. Even if, the parents can do a little scholarly hashtag scholarly army. Get started in just a couple minutes. And then for everyone who's just joining, if you can write down what year you're in or what year your child is in for the parents who are watching without their kids. So I see a lot of year 6s, year 5s. I see some year 3s, year 4s, but mostly year 5, year 6. Six, just once, guys. No need to say multiple times. 5, cool. Excellent, excellent. Now, I do hope that the parents are here. So I know the kids are here. That's great. But if you could get your parents as well slightly to attend, that'd be great. Or if you want to get down some book, pen, paper, write down some of the key points you want to take away, and I guess you can tell your parents. But what I'm going to be doing today, and I'll start shortly. I'll basically just start now. What I want to talk to today, I want to turn the chat off. What I want to talk about today is essentially parenting, styles of parenting, my experience with parenting, and how that affects your kids' performance, or for the kids out there, how I guess your behavior and the relationship between you and your parents can affect your future and your academics and I guess your career as a whole. Um, and what I want to start by doing first, I'll introduce myself. So I'm Sid. I work with Scholarly, and I spend a lot of the time sort of helping parents out, sort of guiding them through the selective process, support. So I spend a lot of my time directly speaking to parents. And what I've also done, before working with Scholarly, I've been in a couple of other tutoring. I've worked for other tutoring centers, face-to-face ones, just ones around. So I have directly interacted with a lot of parents, both with Scholarly and also at other tutoring centers. So I have a really good idea as to what parenting and I guess attitudes and what especially kids are like nowadays. And I'm going to be comparing that with what it was like back when I was doing selective. So this would have been, more than around 10 years ago plus, and the culture and attitudes then, and the implications for kids, right? So let's first talk about some of the things I've seen with parents these days and some of the sort of the consensus, the ideas, the attitudes that I'm seeing with a lot more parents from both my experience with Scholarly and other centers. So with a lot of the parents these days, and there's like a couple different groups, right? There's definitely, and this aspect I genuinely love and I really respect, and that's exactly how I want to raise my kids. There's a lot more emphasis on balance and respecting sort of what the child wants to do and making sure that they actually have an enjoyable childhood. Um, because I know a lot of the parents who want to parent their kids like that have had more sort of traditional parenting where their parents were a lot stricter on them, where their parents sort of forced them to be good in academics and maybe weren't able to have a good time and, go do sports or have fun, things like that. Um, so a lot of these parents who are choosing to have a lot sort of more progressive mindsets in when treating kids and talking to kids and letting them make their decisions, they themselves have experienced harsher parenting. And I completely respect that. And my sort of parents, I'm from an Indian background, and my parents have definitely um, told me about their experiences when they were growing up and sort of the level of intensity of parents and traditional parenting in India. So then with me, and I'll get to how they were with me. But I guess parents who sort of migrated to Australia after having experienced that more intense traditional style of parenting have sort of completely switched the other way, at least from what I'm seeing nowadays. So what I love about that, and I'm going to do the pros and cons of, I guess, modern parenting versus traditional parenting. Um, what I love about that, so one of the first pros, it's a lot better for, I guess, mental health. I see the kids, I think, are definitely a lot happier these days. I see a lot of smiles on the cameras. Kids are happier. Kids are happier. They're having fun. They're having a childhood, which is great, which I love. But, and this is where we get to, I guess, the other side of what is going on with parenting. Now, what I have heard a lot of, especially when speaking directly to parents, I've heard a lot of parents saying that they and I love that you're giving your kids responsibility. They want their kids to want to learn for themselves. And they want their kids to make decisions for themselves, whether they want to attempt at selective, whether they want to do tutoring, whether they want to study. And they're saying, I'm only going to do this only if my kid wants. So, two things. I love that you're giving your child autonomy and responsibility, which you definitely give to your kid. But I think, and I'll sort of recount my experiences after. There's a certain age to which kids should be guided a lot more strongly by their parents, right? And I say this because all the audience here is, I guess, primary school kids. So these kids are less than 12 years old and they haven't sort of experienced the world like your parents. And I know a lot of you kids, it goes both ways. I know a lot of you kids, you probably don't give your parents that due respect that you probably should because your parents have literally migrated from another country for you kids, started a whole life, been through so many more things, life experiences than you have. So you guys need to respect that as well. I'm looking at all you kids out there as well. But for the parents, you guys need to remember that you have migrated. For those who maybe haven't migrated, you've been through a lot more life experience. You you know that there's a certain amount of discipline, academics, work ethic required to make it. Because I can tell, I know each and every one of parent you who has sort of migrated, because I can recount from seeing what my parents have done. It takes that level of hard work and discipline to actually have made a life for your children in Australia. It was not easy, right? So when I sometimes see parents giving their kids a lot more of that free will, which is great, or being a bit softer on them, it just makes me think, okay, I love that you're giving these kids the balance in their life, which is great. I think the balance should be achieved. But are we ingraining the key values of discipline, of work ethic in these kids? Things like that. And having myself spent a lot of time teaching kids and working with kids and things like that, I can directly say that the kids these days have a lower level of discipline and work ethic compared to the parents here and even me, right? So now I will spend a little bit of time talking about how parenting was with me. So this was 10, 15 years ago. My parents came to Australia in the 2000s, that sort of time. Now, what happened with parenting for me is that there was a bit more of that balance compared to how obviously my parents were parented, but they were a lot stricter on me. And I'll talk about how that made me feel as a kid and how I think about it now. Now, as a kid, I will be completely honest. Sometimes did I wish that I played more video games in the moment and had more fun and played outside for longer? Probably yes, completely. But I was a kid. And when I reflect back on it, having gone to North Sydney Boys, having sort of achieved the things that I wanted for myself, none of that would have been possible if I hadn't been pushed to that level. And I generally, like on my graduation day, even in year 6 when I got into North Sydney Boys, I went back and I thanked my parents. I'm like, thank you for it. Like it's actually quite funny to think about now. I had a app on my computer called Net Nanny, which literally used to restrict my internet time to 2 hours. And I could only use my computer on the weekend. So laughing back at it, it's like, wow, fair enough. Like if I had no more internet time, I'd go and do my workbooks for the selective. You know what I mean? And that's how I got to do good. So these sorts of things I've seen a bit lost in parents these days, where my when my parents would be like, okay, to get dinner today, you sort of have to do this work. And it wouldn't be like really enforced, like, oh my God, you have to do this work, otherwise you're going to be in so much trouble. There was boundary set. Okay, you can play your video games 2 hours, but in return, I want these 30 questions done. And I understood that. I understood, okay, here's what I have to do, here's what is needed. And then at the start, when I started tutoring, when I started all this, it was tough. But then over time, I had built that discipline. I had built that work ethic where it's like, okay, maybe 30 questions before dinner, it's actually not a big deal. You know what I mean? And that's where I also do want to spend a lot of time today talking about how I genuinely feel about these exams, such as the selective exam, high school. I genuinely believe that these exams are much more than just simply getting into a school or simply getting into a degree. I think just the process of studying for these exams teaches you and lets you build up your character as a person, giving you life skills of discipline, giving you life skills of work ethic, things like that, right? And I do think that if you have studied hard for these exams, you've built these qualities in yourself. So now, me, having done the selective exam, having been through year 12, in the back of my mind, I know, okay, yes, I've done good in these exams. Yes, I've made it to these schools. But if life throws me anything else, say I'm currently planning to study medicine, things like that. If life throws me maybe a 16-hour shift, something like that, I can be like, okay, I can work through it because I've worked through quite hard things at a young age. And I have instilled in me that sort of in back of my mind, that discipline saying that, okay, if push comes to shove, I can do something if I need to. I have built that confidence in myself only because I have worked hard as a kid and in high school. Now, would I have worked that hard and sort of had that discipline instilled in me if it was up to me? Absolutely not. And I can say that with confidence. I would have been playing video games day after day. I would have, if there was no consequence, like I'm a kid, what did I know better? I would have played video games. I would have played soccer. I would have played on my scooter. I would not have that discipline in me. And I know a lot of the parents, what I hear a lot is, I don't want to push my kid too hard because, selective school, it's if I have to push my child really hard to make a selective, maybe they don't deserve to be there. Right. And that's why I'm explaining this, because this test and the selective test and schooling, it's so much more than just the exam or the outcome. The sort of the more tangible outcome of getting into a school. I genuinely think it's about just giving your kids those life skills and and that discipline. And that's when I'll go back to talking about the parents here, because each and every parent here, I can so confidently say has that discipline, has that work ethic. You guys are having a hard day at work. You will still do it. I know a lot of the mums out you have a hard day at work. You come home, you don't just say, "Oh, I'm not making dinner today. Oh, I'm not doing this." You keep going through it. You know what I mean? Like you just have to. And that is the level of discipline that has been ingrained in you because you saw your parents do this, right? You saw your parents work hard. You have that discipline and work ethic instilled in you where you're like, okay, you need to work hard. A lot of you who immigrated, you couldn't just slack off when you came to Australia. You couldn't slack off and just have everything handed to you. You had to work hard, right? And now that's just been lost. And for a lot of these kids, unfortunately, sort of Sydney, it's not an easy place sort of to be in the job market for. It's very, very competitive. I'm personally sort of seeing this, how hard it is. the kids need that work ethic and discipline. Sometimes they're going to need to spend, 16-hour shifts. They're going to be going, 30 interviews straight, things like that. It's not easy. Even when studying for the final exams, even if you're not looking to be a medicine or go into medicine or go law or anything, there still is a high level of discipline and work ethic required for anything. If your kids want to open a business, if they want to be a professional athlete, any sort of thing, the parents know the best requires discipline, requires work ethic. I can confidently say I do have these qualities built into me a bit more, probably not to the level of my parents because they, like a lot of the other parents here, came empty-handed to Australia, made a life for me. And I definitely had just schooling and life much easier in Australia. I had a lot of things handed to me. But the way I see it, a lot of these kids are just getting everything handed to them. So they have no need to work hard. They have no need for work ethic. They have no need for discipline, right? Because they're given everything. And I guess that's how these qualities are built when you don't have everything and you have to work for it, right? And that is why I do believe studying for these exams, pushing hard, you know, just getting the academics up. I guess academics is a byproduct, right? It's getting into these schools is a byproduct, getting into a good degree is a byproduct. You're still building the ultimate timeless skill of just being a disciplined person who wants to work hard. And I know a lot of the kids here, and I've seen how it's changed in time. Back when me and all my friends were studying for selective, we had that. We knew that we just did what our parents said. We would just work hard. There was really nothing else. Like if you're told to do something, you just do it. I respect my parents, so I'm like, okay, I'm just going to do this work. My parent knows what's best for me. I'll admit, as a kid, sometimes I didn't think that. As a kid, I'm like, okay, why am I studying? What's the point of this? I know a lot of the kids, you're the exact same. Why are you studying? What's the point of this? Trust me, your parents do know best. And parents, you need to have that confidence in yourself that you do know best. There is still merit to traditional parenting. But however, from what I said at the start, I'm 100% big believer that modern parenting and sort of that sort of balance is needed, right? All I want today out of this is a bit more of that balance. I think personally, having spoken to a lot of parents, spoken to a lot of kids, it's gone too far on one side. Um, just as an average, not speaking for all parents, it's gone too far on one side where I'm just seeing the kids aren't disciplined or motivated these days and they don't have that work ethic. I just want to, you know, back to a middle point, and that is genuinely how the academics will improve. I'm not sure if the parents here have seen, but the Australian um, education system ranking has been on a steady decline for the past couple of years. And I genuinely just think it's a cultural thing. Like if you guys search up trend for Australian maths in the past couple of years or academics, we're just going down and down and down for the last 5 years. It's a cultural thing. Everyone's a bit more complacent, bit more relaxed, chill, which is great, but something's got to give, and I it's the academics quite clearly. All right, I'm gonna open up the chat for a couple minutes if we have any questions about that, and then I can sort of continue on if the parents want to ask anything or add anything. The kids have any questions, anything to do with motivation? How much has it declined? There's some specific stats. If you search up decline of Australian maths, it will show you it's in some weird unit, but it has declined quite a bit recently. What are the key values of discipline? So discipline, it's like the big brother of motivation, right? And a lot of the kids here are like, oh, I'm not motivated to do it. I'm not motivated. Um, realistically, I want to close the chat now. Yeah. Let's talk about discipline versus motivation. So I speak to a lot of the parents again, just from personal experience, having spent a lot of time sort of supporting parents, the scholarly parents, and even just other parents at other centers. Um, they always say my kid's not motivated to do it. And there's a couple facets to this. Number one, they are a child. So their ultimate motivations in life definitely aren't studying. And I'll actually cover why they believe that, why they think that way, from more of a psychology point in a second. But number one, they're not going to be motivated to study. They are children. They want to play, they want to have fun. So I think they should play and have fun, but it's up to the parents to sort of say, hey, even if you're not motivated, you should do it. Now, motivation versus discipline, and I know a lot of the parents here know the difference, but so this one could be also for the kids. Discipline, motivation is when you wake up and you say, okay, I want to do this today, so I will do it. Discipline is if you wake up and you say, okay, I actually don't feel like doing this today, but I'm going to do it anyway because I know it's good for me. And a really easy example to understand is quite simply the gym, right? If we look at the gym, um, not many people, especially the people who are very successful when it comes to training and things like that, they don't actually feel like going to the gym. I'd say they lose motivation, right? Even professional athletes, professional soccer players, for the kids out there who might know Ronaldo, things like that, I'm sure he's not motivated to go to train every day, to wake up at 6 a.m., to, have to train for 8 hours a day, things like that. But he's disciplined and that's why he's successful, right? He does it even though he doesn't want to do it. And if that mentality can get ingrained into a child who's, 11, 10, 9, from that young of an age, I can guarantee that you are going to find success whatever you want to do, right? Because say if you're a business owner, things like that, when you're starting up a business, you're not necessarily motivated every day to do it, but you put in that work regardless because you're disciplined. So that is the key value of discipline to answer that question. Um, the balance of kids' sports, extracurricular with studying, and how that works. Okay, I'll talk a bit about, for this one, I can talk a bit more about my experiences and what I did growing up as a kid. So I used to do swimming, play piano, and I would alternate swimming with tennis depending on the season. But I would do swimming, tennis, and piano. Now, this was up until year five. Then, when selective preparation for me came in year six, I dropped everything except for occasionally tennis, to get a bit of physical activity, but I didn't do it all. Now, was that choice up to me? Not particularly. My sort of parents said, hey, um, selective is around the corner, so we want you to be studying more. Um, and I was like, okay, fair enough. Um, let's do it. I'll only maybe do tennis, right? And that allowed me to study a lot more. At the time, did I wish I could maybe spend more time swimming and doing other things and having fun and playing? Probably, yeah. I did not always look forward to having to wake up early on a Saturday and a Sunday morning and after school come back and do my workbooks, right? So a lot of my sort of motivation as a kid and discipline was supplemented by my parent because I didn't have that ingrained in me when I was that young. Same with most of the kids here. You don't have that in you, and your kids probably don't have that in you. So it needs to be supplemented from your parents until there comes a point in time where I grew to the age I had those skills. This would have happened around maybe late high school where I said, okay, I can kind of do it all myself now. And it still probably didn't happen until I got into university where you literally have to do it all yourself. I'd say up until year 12, there was that level of supplementation from my parents, and it sort of drops off. So I'd say when I was younger, my parents had to supplement the discipline motivation almost completely because I had none of it as a kid. Then when I started to get that ingrained in myself, it dropped off, right? And that's essentially what happened. So yeah, that is the progression of discipline motivation. But in terms of sports and extracurriculars, I sort of just listened to my parents, and I would probably restrict it to maybe two extracurriculars, um, things that you really, really enjoy. Because when I got into North Sydney Boys, I picked up everything back up. I started swimming again. I started tennis. I started boxing. I started a bunch of different sports, because I knew being in that selective school meant I basically didn't have to put much effort into HSC, which I didn't really, and I just did a lot better because I got all the sort of answers and opportunities given to me just by being in North Sydney Boys. Cool. Now let's talk a bit about um, high school and different and coaching centers and how coaching works in high school and some of the differences between schools, North Sydney Boys, James Roos, and just how I see what the progression is from parenting in primary school versus parenting in high school. So, having been to North Sydney Boys, I did have a lot of friends in the other high schools. Um, I had friends all across James Roos, Borkham Hills, Normanhurst, Hornsby. So I do understand these schools quite well, and I do also know what their parents were like. Now, I'll first recount about my experiences of parenting in high school. And once I did get into North Sydney Boys, um, school did give me a lot more help. And my friends, of, they all had parents who had that similar sort of mindset, that value on academics, education. So it was so normal in year seven for me, for us just to always be talking about, maths and study and work. And we don't like, mind you, we would also be having fun playing video games, sports, but there was in the back of our heads this consistent culture of academics, right? Because all our parents had given this to us. So that's all we knew. You know what I mean? So when we would go home every day, yeah, I'm not gonna lie, we did used to play a bunch of games. We used to play sports after school, but every night, and I kid you not, every night, even in year seven, I would be studying because all my other friends were studying. And if I didn't study, it would make me feel like, what am I doing? Like all my other friends are studying, I want to do it. And that's where I wanted to talk about, I guess, the psychology of kids, and why your kids, especially being in a primary school, don't want to study. It's as simple as they don't see much of their friends study, right? And that is the difference, the dichotomy between the Australian schooling culture and I guess the culture and attitude and values of immigrants, such as, I see a lot, Indian immigrants, or you're coming from Korea, China, any of those sort of immigrants, or even not the immigrants, people who sort of have a value on academics, that cultural value isn't seen in the Australian schooling system. I was the only person in my entire primary school, I went to a Catholic primary school, who even attempted the selective exam apart from my brother. I had an older brother. We were literally the only two people in thousands of kids who had any idea what the selective school was. So when I say that none of my friends in primary school studied, I genuinely mean it. Primary school was just one big play day. We knew primary school was just a lot of fun for us. And your kids, I'm guessing, have a lot of fun in school. But I can tell you wholeheartedly, there was not much learning in primary school. Like I would ask the parents right now, ask your kids what they have just learned in school, regarding maths. And I will tell you it's way behind what you guys learnt when you were in school at the same age, right? And that's just that's not a bad thing. It's just different. It's just a different culture. It's a different schooling curriculum. But a lot of these year five kids, who aren't doing any selective prep are just learning what a fraction is, things like that. And you guys who are going for the selective test, you know how hard the selective test is, and you need to be an expert in fractions by the time you're in year four. Otherwise, like it's going to be tough. So when you have your kids who are basically put into an environment 6 hours a day, 5 days a week, sort of 200 days a year, that is a lot of time spent, um, where basically the whole culture around them is, okay, I don't need to study. None of my friends study. I can just have fun. So the parents, are fighting against that, right? If you do the maths, that's a lot of hours, 200 days, 6 hours a day, 1,200 hours of time being in that culture that you parents need to sort of play tug of war with and say, hey, you actually need to study. Because all they know and all they see is kids not studying, right? You guys need to fight against that and say, hey, you actually need to study. Like, and that's what I was mentioning about when you're in a selective high school. All I see and all my friends do 200 days a year, 6 hours a day is my friends studying. So do you see how it just becomes so much easier as a parent once your child is in that selective school system? Because you're on the same side of the tug of war, right? All your friends, like when I got into high school, I kid you not, my mum would tell me sometimes, hey, why are you studying so much? Come down and watch a movie with us, spend some time away from your books. Because I genuinely I started to enjoy studying. I wanted to always get higher marks in my test because all my friends were getting higher marks in tests, and we would compare. We'd be like, "Oh, what marks did you get?" Not once did I feel pressured into studying, and that is the number one common thing I hear from parents. Selective schools are really bad. They pressure your kids. They give so much pressure to your kids. What is pressure, right? Pressure is when you're doing something you don't want to do. That's when you will feel pressure. If I want to do it, it's not really pressure. And how do I want to do it? Because all my friends are doing it. And I can say confidently when you're 12 to 18, the years you're in high school or even in primary school, you're very, very impressionable. You will just see and do what the people around you do. If I'm spending 6 hours a day around all these other kids who are talking about studying and things like that, studying was not a difficult chore for me, right? So that is the one common misconception I see parents have that, if I push my kids too hard and, get into a selective, it's going to be even tougher for them. Trust me, it actually just becomes easier on you to parent your child. Because what happens on the other side of that? Say if your kids don't go to a high school, um, where studying is a culture, such as a public school or just another school with that Australian sort of relaxed culture, um, then again, you're on the other side of the tug of war. You're trying to they're in this place 200 days, 6 hours a day, and you're trying to tell them to study. But now you have the added factor that your kids are a teenager and they probably are not going to listen to you. At least with primary school kids, they are still a bit more impressionable. They're a bit younger. They aren't in that sort of teenager mindset as of yet, so they will probably listen to what you say. But it is, not easy. And having been spent some time as a high school tutor myself, it's not easy if a teenage kid doesn't want to do something, and doesn't see the benefits of studying because none of their friends are studying. It's not easy as a parent or even a tutor to make them study. And it's actually a lot easier to do that with a younger child who's maybe in primary school, because they have more respect for the parents, at least, as while they're not a teenager. Cool. I'll open up the chat again if we have any questions in the meantime. Is that sort of whole idea um, clear to everyone? Is there any other questions, any confusions regarding that, about sort of like the psychology that kids have and sort of my experience being in North Sydney Boys, which is, the top one, top two. A lot of the parents here think that it's such a scary school. School is actually really fun for me. Like I didn't really have to work too excessively hard because it just become a habit for me to study and just go home, do my maths homework, and then I know I'd just get playtime after. How can your parents dictate your life if they're not you? We'll cover that one. Cool. Let's go through. Overwhelming emotions when selective is in 6 weeks. Let's talk about that one. So, selective, I'm not going to sugarcoat this. It's a scary time for everyone. Parents, kids, there's a lot on the line, but you need to think about the non-tangible things you have learned while studying for selective. The fact that your child, or even you, I'm not sure who's writing that, has those overwhelming emotions means that they place importance on the selective exam, which is honestly, that's what I love to see. If they weren't bothered, I would be more concerned. The fact that they're placing importance on a test like this means that they actually care about it, right? This can tell me that just in that process, just in the studying process, you're already a winner if you feel that way because you have learned things like caring about studies, caring about education, caring about discipline. So even whether you make a selective or not, and I'll talk to you about how we can still be great even if we don't make a selective. Um, you have that discipline instilled with you. You have that character, and that is genuinely all that matters. You can still do very well in any school if those qualities are really, really built, right? It's now, am I what I was saying before? It is easier to build discipline and things like that in the selective school, but it's not impossible coming from any other school if you have the right parental support, right? Your parents will just have to work a bit extra harder to help discipline you because it might not come as naturally, right? So I honestly, when I see kids who are really stressed about selective, it's not good to be stressed, but it is good that you care about it that much to be stressed because it tells me you have built that discipline, you have built that work ethic, and then this test means a lot to you, right? That is, you're basically a winner. And that's what I was talking about earlier, that these exams are so much more than just the end tangible result. It's so much more than just a mark or a school or a degree. It's about these sort of invisible qualities that you have built, the academic rigor, the discipline, things like that. That is the ultimate thing in life, right? You can still study, you can still be a successful business owner or a dentist or anything in life as long as you have those qualities built, right? Because these tests and this exam, it's all just to help you with your career at the end of the day. But there's nothing that will help you as a person grow more than just those qualities of discipline and work ethic, which I've been harping on about over and over and over, right? So I hope that answers that one. Um, how can your parents dictate your life if they're not you? So your parents are not dictating your life. They are sort of guiding you the right way because they have so much more experience in this department than you do. They have lived a lot more life than you have. It's the same way that if I was to talk to any of these kids here, I would not, if I'm teaching them maths, I wouldn't ask them, hey, what do you think the answer is? I would tell them what the math is. I would tell them how to solve these questions because I have a lot more experience in maths. I can teach them. You as parents, you are teachers. You are the responsible for teaching your kids the qualities of discipline, to teach your kids to study, to teach that. If you don't teach it to them, if you let it to be up to them, they're not going to study, right? It's like you don't go to class and your kids tell the teacher how a question works. The teacher tells the kids, right? But in a school environment, that dynamic is set clear. This is the teacher, this is the student, and the students all listen to the teacher. What I'm seeing nowadays is that the parents and kids are sort of on equal levels. When no, at the end of the day, you are the parent. You are essentially their life teacher, not just sort of a maths teacher. You are their life teacher, and they are your child, right? You need to make sure that dynamic is clear because definitely for me as a kid, that dynamic was clear, where I would respect what my parents had to say. Or even still, if I didn't want to do something, I knew that my mum was my sort of life teacher, right? So I would just do what she says because she knows more than me. At the time, I didn't enjoy it, but now looking back, it makes sense why she acted in that way. So a lot of that parents need to have that dynamic set more clear and just have more confidence and trust in yourself that yes, I actually do know what I'm doing. I was the one who sort of made a life for my kid, did all this. I'm sure a lot of the parents here are very successful just to have sort of built this life, where you can even consider a thing like a selective exam or any of these things. So you all have done really well for yourselves. So have that little bit of pride, I guess. How much work should I give my child? So this depends from kid to kid. I always like to do sort of a foot in the door approach, which is a little psychology thing. You start small, then you just build it up slowly over time, right? Again, I'll use the simple example of the gym. You're not going to take someone who's new to the gym and give them 100 kilos. You're going to first start with 5 kilos, 10 kilos, let that muscle build. So in this example, the muscle that is being built is that sort of character and that discipline, right? So for your kids, maybe, let's start with 5 questions a day. Let's start with one piece of writing a week. Then after they do that for a bit, oh wow, like 5 questions, that's like I can do that easily. Okay, let's bump it up to 10 questions. There's really no end to it. Um, but I would just sort of experiment, start low, then go higher. I would say as an average, by the time your child is in year six, if they are able to set aside 2.5 to 3 hours a day of studying, I'd say 2.5 hours. Um, that's the level that they need to be at. 2.5 hours. Because when they're in high school, it's only going to be more and more and more. I remember in my year 12, I was easily studying 5 to 6 hours a day. In my HSC preparation, it was around 8 hours a day when I time off, going to school. Because I had built it over the years, 8 hours a day felt quite normal to me. So now, like for example, in university, if I need to study, 6 hours, it's nothing to me because I know I've done that before. I've done that when I was a little kid. Like in my 20s, I can do that quite easily. And now, if I was to be in sort of the workforce, working as a doctor, things like that, if I was to spend, do a 16-hour shift or work a lot more overtime, I'd be confident in myself that I can do it simply because I've done it as a kid, right? And the number one mistake is when kids studying for the HSC are they you basically have to study a lot if you want to do well, right? When they aren't used to studying maybe 2 hours, 3 hours a day when they were younger, how are they going to manage 7 hours a day when they're older? You just need to build it up slowly over time. So, for example, I can, if a kid's in year two, half an hour a day is great. When they're in year three, maybe 1 hour a day is great. Year four, 1.5 hours. Year five, 2 hours. Year six, 2.5 hours, right? Year seven, year seven to 10, it can sort of be around 2.5 hours, just get the work done, do the maths, things like that. 2.5 hours really isn't much. You come home from school at 4 p.m., you do 4 to 5 p.m., that's 1 hour. You have a little break. Then maybe you do an hour before dinner time. So maybe you do 6 to 7. I don't know when you're having dinner. Then maybe you do, half an hour after dinner, you have a bit more playtime. If you split it up, it's really not that much time. Um, 2.5 hours is quite not that much. Then by the time they're in year 11, 12, that can bump up to around 4, 5 hours, depending on what your kid's going for. How to communicate with kids to channel challenges. So this, I not I'm not sort of a dad myself, so I wouldn't know exactly how to deal with every kid, this and that. I can recount on what I have spent a lot of time as a tutor when I in the sort of limited interactions I have. Now, when I sort of tell the kids why the effort is all worth it, I sort of say the same things I'm saying now. It's all about that character. It's all about the discipline. It's not just about that end result of selective, things like that. And I talk to them about what they want to be in the future, right? Maybe if they like the idea of being a professor or being a lawyer or being literally anything, they still need these qualities, right? And the way to build these qualities is through studying or is through anything else. But studying is sort of the one that we're focusing on. So when I talk about challenges and sort of uh, navigating challenges as a kid, with kids, since they're not able to do that themselves, I would say a lot of parental support is needed to sort of explain to them why studying is good, why maybe they don't feel like studying. Um, so this will vary kid to kid, circumstance to circumstance, but I would sort of just approach it from the standpoint of saying, hey, look, I know you don't feel like doing this. Let's just start small, go up. If you find it hard, I will help you. If you need extra support, I'll help you, things like that. But the underlying idea behind getting kids to study and sort of overcoming challenges is I always like to talk about just building up your character as a person rather than, understanding how to solve, 2x plus y equals this, right? If when I was tutoring kids and they would have a really hard question, that they're, crying over, don't feel like doing it, I'd say, hey, this is so much more than understanding this question right now. This tells me that if life gives you something hard, you are willing to work through it. So what kind of person do you want to be? Do you want to be the kind of person who might, give up and who might say, no, it's too hard, I don't want to do it? Or do you want to just get through it? Because what wasn't important, it's good that they can solve this question, but that wasn't the most important thing to me as a tutor. The most important thing to me was that when they are given something hard, they get through it, right? If they're on exam day and they're given a hard question, they get through it. If they, as a mother, you guys get hard things thrown at you day after day. You don't just sometimes say, "Hey, I don't really feel like doing it." You know what I mean? You get through it, right? I explained that to kids, and they got a lot more just like, "Okay, I will get through it. I want to be that kind of person who gets through it." Um, cool. What do you think can be used as a motivator, especially as we don't allow screens during the weekdays? So for motivation, it's a tough one because there's not much that will get kids to be motivated to do it. I think it's more about ingraining that mentality I just mentioned about building up a character to kids. And especially for the young kids, discipline is very, very important because, again, it's hard with kids. I know having tutored them, it's not easy getting them to be motivated to do something. I would say if you can find sort of a role model or an idol they can look up to, someone who's been through it. I know for some parents they mentioned that the kids like the webinars or like Steve, the 7 a.m. club. That can help a lot. Or if they have a little friend group who are all studying together, And that's when I get into that group mentality. You feel less alone if all your friends are doing something, right? And that's why when I was in North Sydney Boys in my high school, studying, like I could always have motivation because I'd see all my friends study. A lot of these kids feel very isolated, feel very alone. We just need to make them feel less alone. So I guess a lot of the scholarly kids, when they show up to the group things, they show up to these webinars, they feel a lot less alone because again, all you parents are realizing, all of you sort of feel the same way, right? It's tough, it's not easy, your parents are not motivated, kids are not motivated, but all you kids are in this together. So for motivation, I would say just have a chat, sort of try reset their mentality, make them understand why this is important, and just if however you want to do this, get them to do the work and understand that discipline is going to be the one that's going to get them anywhere, not motivation. Um, cool. My kid doesn't show any interest in selective preparation, how to make him more interesting. And this is where I get to sort of you need it's not going to be interesting. To put it simply, selective prep studying, it's not going to be interesting. And that's when I would have a chat to this kid and say, hey, it's not going to be interesting. It's not hard. Do you choose to still get through it even when life gives you something hard, or do you choose to give up because it's not fun, right? Um, and same with you parents. You guys do the exact same thing. Working that many hours a day you do, it's not fun. You would all much rather be in, Thailand on a lovely holiday, things like that. But you still go to work, you still put food on the table. It's not fun, but you still have to do it. Right? So you guys all understand this concept. You need to explain it to your kid. It's not going to be interesting, but you still have to get through it. And if the kids can learn this, they can do, I genuinely feel anything. Cool. I will open up the chat. The chat is still open if anyone has a bit more questions. Otherwise, I will continue about talking about different high schools. Let's have a chat about the different high schools. So, when I look at the parents who of the kids who are in James Roos versus North Sydney Boys, Borkham Hills, and just the different high schools as a whole, in James Roos, the experience that I mentioned about North Sydney boys, all my friends studying, so it felt easy for me, that is only amplified. And when I saw the James Roos kids, I used to think, oh my God, how can these year 7 children even think about studying that much a day? But when I speak to them, these people, like, they're not actually stressed. And studying this many hours and doing this much coaching and working that hard, it seems so natural for them, and that's what confused me. I was like, I'm studying, but I don't know how I can do any more. But all of these kids find studying, 3, 4 hours a day, it's not really hard because they're in that group together, right? Um, and that's what made it easy for them. Now, at my school, yeah, studying 2 hours a day was pretty normal, because that's what everyone sort of did. So it wasn't necessarily hard on the parents in any of these schools to push the children because they had that sort of group mentality to work through it. Now, when I look at my friends who came from public schools, they used to look up at me the same way I looked up at the James Roos kids, saying, "How do you even think about studying 3 hours a day? Like, how does that even make sense? I can't even study 30 minutes a day." And that's when I go back to that underlying psychology that yes, when your kids are between the age of 12 to 18, they are literally like sponges, and they will just take whatever's around them and absorb that. So, whatever school that your kids end up going to, maybe if they don't get into James, things like that, they still can be, like, do very well and have that discipline. But it is up to the parents to provide that supplementation and that extra motivation, saying, hey, I know you don't feel like studying, but you still need to get the work done. And then it will be maybe, okay, studying 3 or 4 hours a day, it's not that hard, right? And that's why I think a lot of parents get scared. Oh, if my kid doesn't make selective, it's not going to be, the best. It is a lot easier if they make selective, but still not impossible as long as you parents are working hard with your kids and sort of being their life teacher, right? It's really up to you, when they're in primary school and high school to be their life teacher, to support them when they're not motivated, to support them with discipline, to have that sort of harshness on that sometimes, saying that, hey, no, I've done a lot more life than you. Unfortunately, you guys, 10 years old, you do not know how to be more successful than I do. And it's just fact. These kids are 10 years old. They don't know how success is built, how life is built. You guys do, right? So what I want from today is for the parents to have a little bit of more of that sort of, I guess, control slash push over your kids, um, compared to what I'm seeing these days, where a lot of the parents are saying, hey, maybe we can just sort of see if the kids want to do this, or we can see, let me ask my kid if they want to study. My kid doesn't feel like doing it, so I'm not going to do it. Like that doesn't make sense to me. You know what I mean? Like if you want your child to be in a selective school, or if you want this for your child, it is up to you. You are able to make that decision. And I think a lot of the parents are just getting a bit they don't want to have that burden of responsibility. And I think a lot of it is that you simply just don't want to see your child in discomfort or in pain or crying or getting upset. And I totally get that. It's not an easy sight, especially for your mom. You like the moms, the dads, you guys love your parents. Sorry, you guys love your kids more than anyone in this world. So it's rightfully so that you don't want to see them happy. You don't want to see them cry. You don't want to see them upset. They are still the little baby in your eyes, and seeing your little baby cry, it's not easy. You know what I mean? But it is also up to you with that responsibility, with that love you have for your kids. It is up to you to have those hard talks with your kids, to put them through that struggle. Otherwise, they're not going to grow. And that is what I just want more of. Because as a tutor with me, I have less sort of connection to these kids. I can be harsh on these kids. I can say, no, you have to do this. I don't care about, whether you don't feel like doing it, you are going to do it. Because I don't have that sort of emotional sort of depth that the parents do. So and that's when it gets tough because the parents, again, as I mentioned, you don't want to see your kids cry, but again, you guys spend so much more time with your children than your teachers do, than the tutors do. So it is really up to you to have that harshness on your kids, to have that sort of yin yang where saying, I love you and I really respect you and I want you to be happy. But at the end of the day, if you're upset about studying, like you still have to study regardless. I can't you and parents, you need to understand your kids aren't always going to be happy, aren't always smiling if that you also want them to learn things like discipline, work ethic. And I can guarantee a lot of the parents here have been through these struggles as a kid. And I don't want it to be that extreme where your kids are crying all the time and their smiles are wiped off their face. All I want is a balance because I can tell you a balance is possible. I had that balance as a kid. I was sometimes upset, sometimes, saying, I don't want to do this. I don't really remember crying or anything, but I was definitely like a bit angry. I don't feel like studying right now. I wish I was outside, just riding my scooter, things like that. But I had time to do that as well. But I also understood that I still had to get that work done because my parents would say, "Hey, I get that you don't feel like doing this sometimes, but it is going to be better for you if you do." Right? And now looking back on it, when I graduated, done all this, I say, okay, it did help me a lot, even in HSC. HSC became a lot easier for me because I'd gone through this struggle. Sometimes in HSC, when it's literally the most stressful thing for me in life, you just want to break down. Sometimes you want to cry, things like that. But I was like, okay, at the end of the day, I can still push through because I did that in my selective exam. I did that in my studying. I've gone through that struggle in the past, so struggle is not as big of a deal. So to sum up what I've just mentioned, I need the parents to have a bit more of that yin yang. I know you don't want to see your kids cry. I know you just always want to make them happy. I know you've had seen these newborn babies grow up, a couple years, and it's not easy for a parent to see your little baby cry. But unfortunately, there's no one else in the world who has the authority over your kids like you do, who can tell them what to do, who can have these harsh talks with the kids and make them do unlike you parents. And a lot of you parents, I don't want to say sort of you're, chickening out or anything, but you're afraid to adopt that role when there's no one else who can take that role except for you. I can't take that role. Teachers can't take that role. No one else can do it but you. Um, and I definitely want you guys to have that sort of more modern parenting style approach where you let your kids have fun, you let them do all these sorts of things. I think it's extremely important to have a balance, a lot of emphasis on mental health. I see the kids as a whole are happier these days, which I love, but the kids from what I've seen, all the kids I've spent time with tutoring, speaking to things like that, they don't have that discipline work ethic built in them, which we spent this whole sort of session discussing why it's really important to have these things. Cool. do we have any questions? We'll do some question asking time for the last couple minutes, and then we'll go from there. Yes, there will be a recording of the session afterwards. Okay, how many hours of study should you do if you're in year six and selective is your doorstep? If selective was right around the corner for me, I would be spending 4 hours quite easily studying a day because realistically, the kids aren't doing much in school, right? And 4 hours sounds a lot, but like a lot. But if we did 1 hour before school, 1 hour right after school, then maybe 2 hours after dinner, um, that's what I would be doing. I would be leaving no spare sort of gas in the tank when preparing for selective, because the amount of opportunities that it can give your kids are literally quite unparalleled. So I'll be talking about that in the future, selective versus public schools. But if your kid can make a selective, I would do everything to get that because it makes it easier on you as a parent if they do, right? So I'd say push them now so you don't have to worry about pushing an angry teenager who doesn't want to listen to you when they're, in year 7 to 12, because that probably will happen once kids are teenagers. How do you manage distractions? Um, well, me personally, my parents put a thing called Net Nanny on my computer, which used to literally turn off restrict my internet access, restrict my access to games, websites. So it was a little bit more sort of harsh, and that's what I'm saying. It needs to be a bit more harsh. And I'm not gonna lie, I didn't enjoy having my gaming time restricted, things like that. Sometimes I'd be throwing fits, but at the end of the day, I was able to get into a selective because I was restricted from that. You know what I mean? It's like if I go to a personal trainer, I'm trying to lose weight. The personal trainer is not going to allow me to just eat donuts if I want to lose weight. He's going to say, okay, you're not getting any donuts. I'll sort of not let you eat them if you want to lose weight. So you have to choose one. Do you want them to have distractions and sort of, um, give them access to it? Or do you want to just go a bit more cold turkey and say, hey, you're not going to have any distractions? It's not easy in that sort of analogy to lose weight and to only eat salads every day, but you just have to do it. And your personal trainer will be saying, hey, no, remember the end goal. Remember that you still have to put in this hard work to do it. You might not want to do it, but you have to do it. So with distractions, I would sort of, case by case, I would sort of block their sort of access to any of these distractions, because kids are a lot sort of harder they can't control their sort of impulsiveness as well as adults, just sort of from a more neurology sort of psychology sort of aspect. Where adults, we can see there's a lot of papers on this. Adults, we can assess the long-term benefits of something and resist short-term sort of temptations. Kids, they will always choose the short-term temptations over the long terms. So just by taking away those short-term temptations, it will be better because brains aren't developed enough to say, hey, maybe I should just not do it as much. How do we incorporate scholarly lectures to study time? Does it count? Yeah, I'd say a scholarly lecture, the 1 hour ones count as an hour of study, definitely. And then you can do, an hour of homework before, an hour of homework after, things like that. How to help kids handle frustration during learning. This is, if kids are frustrated during learning, I honestly that is the natural part of learning. Every single child I've learned, when they don't get something, they get frustrated, and it's okay. I would sort of go down the aspect of saying, if you are even frustrated that you can't understand a question, what it's telling me is that you actually care about this. Like, you care about this question enough to get angry, to get a bit frustrated. So it means a lot to you. And then I'll just tell them that, just keep sort of going at it. And then the kids will have this realization themselves that, wow, I was frustrated, I was upset, but I kept pushing and I got this question. And that is just, there's nothing else in life that can teach them that unless you've gone through it, right? So I would say there needs to be that little bit of crying, that little bit of frustration. But once they make it to the other side, they now know if they get frustrated in the future or they find it hard, they have that confidence. Hey, last time I solved it, this time I can do it. So that frustration, that upset, that anger is a normal part of learning. And every kid I've taught has seen it, but I've seen them come out the other side because I motivate them. I say, hey, don't give up. I know you're angry. I know you're frustrated. Yes, you're crying, but don't give up. When they solve it, their face beams with happiness. And then now if they get a hard question in the future, they're like, hey, like I've done that hard question. How much worse can it really get? So now in the future, like literally, and if I see anything hard, I can control that frustration because I've been through so many struggles and saying, hey, it's all right. I'll get through it. And same with the parents here. You guys have all been through frustrations. Maybe, you apply for a job, you don't get it, but you're like, hey, it's all right. I've done a lot worse things in my life. I'll apply. I'll go for the next job. Things like that, right? If the kids can learn this when they're young and just get it ingrained in them, they can do anything when they're older. How many hours should I study as a kid who was super scared, and how do I keep my focus and energy? Um, this will depend on where you're at right now, what you need to work on. I would sort of say just start slow, start a bit less. Maybe just work on sort of building a consistent habit. I would rather you spend 20 minutes studying every day rather than just a 5 hour burst over the weekend. Because what is the underlying skill we want to train? Discipline. So if you can do 20 minutes a day, even when you don't want to do it, that will be great. Then slowly we'll up it to 30 minutes a day, 40 minutes. We'll just keep on upping it, upping it, upping it, upping it. And that's what will be the most important thing for you to get that sort of focus and energy back. If it can be more of a habitual thing studying rather than dependent on your motivation. Because a lot of the kids here, you'll have random bursts of motivation. Okay, today I'm going to bang out 40 questions of maths. Then the rest of the week, you don't want to feel like doing anything. But if as a kid you have trained it, okay, maybe I'll just do 10 questions today. And I feel like doing 10 questions. Oh, but tomorrow I don't actually feel like doing 10 questions, but I'll do it anyways. You are training that skill of being disciplined. Is selective better or private? We will definitely be discussing this in the future. I think that's quite a nuanced question and a lot of sides I can go to. I'll leave that for another webinar or a talk that will be discussed quite shortly. Um, how many study hours a day? How do we not get distracted and focus on studies? Distractions are very normal. Now, me having said this whole thing to you, even the parents here, we all, at the end of the day, we are human. We find ourselves scrolling on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, whatever it may be, that we will get distracted. We're not perfect, right? But as adults, your parents, myself, and like I have this ability, even if we did get distracted, we say, okay, we still need to get the work done at the end of the day, right? And then we can say, okay, I'm going to just um, stop it now and get this work done. For the kids, how do we not get distracted and focus on studies? It's going to take a bit more help from your parent. But the first step is having the self-awareness as a child or, for the parents and saying, hey, mom, I'm getting distracted and I don't know what to do. Then your parents can actually step in and help you out and say, hey, you're getting distracted. You are going to need to get the work done today, regardless of, how you feel about doing it. But you need to be very transparent and clear if you want any improvement. It's kind of like I'll always use the sort of analogy of the gym. You say, hey, how do I resist eating junk foods? Um, and it's hard to resist. We're always going to pick up a chocolate here and there. But I will go to my personal trainer and say, hey, I need your advice. I need you to monitor me. I need you to tell me if I'm getting distracted because I know I can't be trusted myself with a chocolate bar around me. But if my personal trainer is around to say, hey, Sid, no chocolate bars, I'm not going to eat the chocolate bar. So for the kids out there, be self-aware, be transparent. Hey, I'm getting distracted. I'm not doing the work. Can you just put an eye over me so I can get it done? And your parents will be like, yeah, sure. I'll give you an eye over you. I'll help motivate you. I'll help discipline you. And for the parents, you are responsible for that sort of disciplining, for supplementing your kids with that. Um, cool. Is North Sydney better than Baulkham Hills, or we select school closer to home? Both have their pros and cons. If Baulkham Hills is closer, that would obviously be one thing. Having seen the difference between both, I would say that people from um, North Sydney boys tend to have experienced sort of more things, such as we had a bit more things to do with, debating teams, sports, public speaking, um, it's a very different, it's more sort of private school culture to an extent because we're in the city or around other private schools. Um, versus Borkham Hills, it's a lot more group think. They're it's a tough one, and that's what I'll be talking about in another sort of webinar, the exact differences between each school. I'd say it really depends on your kids. If your if he enjoys if it's your son, he enjoys things to do with computers and t computer science and more IT side, I think he'd love North Sydney Boys. Borkham Hills is a really great all-rounder school if he wants all the other things. But if he's also interested in sports, I'd say North Sydney's better. Private school, selective school, we'll talk about that again in the future. Net Nanny, so Net Nanny was the one I used as a kid. There's a lot more internet blockers nowadays as well. Yes, so North Sydney Boys is the top one for this year. We did quite well, but if they're in those top five schools, James Roos, Borco, North Sydney Boys, North Sydney Girls, they are at a really, really good level. I'd say even Sydney Boys is a great school to be. Um, and there's a big difference between those top five selective schools versus the ones that come after, like Penrith, Girraween. The culture is very different. At schools like Penrith, Girraween, kids might be not as inclined to study. And that's how your kid might turn out to be because they're like, oh, the kids around me aren't studying too hard. I don't need to study too hard. At the top five schools, there's just a whole school culture to study more. So it's not necessarily that they push their kids more, it's just a different culture. So the top five selector schools have that culture where, okay, studying 4 hours is normal. So the kids study 4 hours a day. It's not that hard. But the bottom 5 to 10 below that, that culture is still there, more than public schools, but a bit less. So getting into a selective school, it's all about just getting that culture ingrained into your kids more than just the actual education. Because the teachers, the schooling, the education, it's all still basically the same. You're essentially sending your child to the school for that culture to be ingrained in them for that sort of psychological aspect. Right. And up there, there will be the recording available for any of these other sort of more questions, things like the specific sort of questions, for a lot of the scholarly kids here, you can send questions on our WhatsApp, things like that. I'll go through a couple more for the ones that have been sent. If you guys had no other questions, then I had a great time talking to you all. You're all free to leave now. If you guys are interested in getting help for the kids not with Scholarly, you can, on that QR code, I know it's reversed, but it should be able to work. You can reach out to us on WhatsApp. We can have a chat about how we can help your kids, things like that. For all the scholarly kids with selective coming up, I wish you best of luck. I hope that helped. And for the parents out there, it is really up to you guys to be helping discipline and push your kids these next couple weeks. For the kids who aren't going for the selective, um, it is very important. Right now, it is very important that your parents sort of step in more and say, hey, this is what you have to do. It's going to only help you down the line. All I want is for you kids to have discipline ingrained in you. But other than that, that's it from me. I'll answer some of the questions now as well if you want to stay. The recording will be on Facebook. William is in year five. So Tien Hyun, I would message us on WhatsApp and then we can have a direct chat about that. Any of the specific sort of questions about your kids, message on WhatsApp and we'll help with that. For all the non-scholarly parents as well, feel free to reach out to us on WhatsApp, see how we can help you out potentially. But other than that, I wish you all a great Sunday. It was great chatting to you guys. Hope you have a great Easter. Enjoy the public holiday tomorrow. Um, have a nice day. Goodbye, everyone.